everyone. Welcome back to the Talk of Fame podcast. My name is Kylie Montigny, and I hope everyone is enjoying their day whenever you're listening. And today's guest on Talk of Fame is CJ Scarlet. CJ is doing so many things, which includes being a badass grandma, a danger expert, and best-selling author. She's a survivor of childhood molestations and sexual assault as a college freshman, offering her the invaluable perspective of a crime victim. She served as the executive director of a child advocacy center for abused children and as a director of victims issues for the North Carolina Attorney General's office. So when it comes to discussing abuse and danger, she's also considered an expert, which I would never call myself an expert in those type of things. But in her 34 years as a danger expert and survivor advocate, she sees too many godful causes of violence and abuse towards children, and she simply couldn't live with herself if she didn't do anything in her power to stop it. CJ just released a brand new book earlier this year called Raising Badass Kids, A Savvy Parent's Guide to Predator-Proofing Tweens and Teens. This unputdownable manual is a new Bible for parents looking to raise safe, savvy, confident kids and provide you with the tools to have a candid conversation with your tween or teen without scaring them to death. So I know CJ for quite some time, and we have been in the works and do this episode for quite some time, I know, and I'm so happy we're able to do this. She is doing amazing work to help bring awareness for child safety. So I welcome to show us today, CJ. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Holly, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Same here. So of course, you have experience with a child molestation and sexual assault. And if people are not familiar with your story, can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Starting at the age of 6, I was sexually molested and I became a serial victim, meaning multiple people, multiple incidents happened to me. And the reason they happened to me is that I didn't know I could say no to adults. I didn't know that I didn't have to do what they told me to do. They told me not to tell, and I didn't know that I had to keep secrets, that I didn't have to keep secrets. This led me to become very compliant as a victim. And predators look for that in victims. They look for children who are eager, eager for attention and affection, who are clearly have low self-esteem and confidence. And those, they groom children like that. And I was the perfect victim. Then when I was in college at 19, as a freshman, I was raped by a sheriff's deputy that I was dating, and then by my Marine Corps recruiter. The same year, what's not in my bio, the same year I narrowly escaped being lured into a sex trafficking ring and was able to escape from that situation and get away. But all these things that happened to me caused a lot of trauma, and I developed severe PTSD. And that followed me through most of my life until I hit 30. And one day everything came rushing back. And I say the pain became greater than my ability to contain it. So I had to do something with it. And I could choose either to go back into denial or I could deal with the trauma. And I chose to deal with it. And I got help at the local crisis center. And then they asked me to be on their board of directors. And that launched my advocacy journey. So that was in 1990. So for the last 34 years, in one way or another, I've been advocating for victims of crime, especially women and children who've been sexually assaulted.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Like I know you told me this story a couple of times before, and it really keeps me like surprised every single time. It's really a story that really needs to be talked about. I know a lot of people don't really know how to identify abuse or sexual assault or molestation or whatever that case may be. I know a lot of people don't really know what it is or how can they identify the situation, if that makes sense.
They identify if their child's being abused or if they themselves are in a situation where they might be in danger.
Yeah, like because they don't know. How did you kind of from your personal experience identify those situations?
When your intuition is telling you something is off, our intuition is it was our first brain. Before we had a brain in our head, we had the brain in our gut. It
Mhm.
literally is a second brain. It was the first brain. And our intuition will go off when we're in a situation where we feel uncomfortable or scared. And a lot of times we've been raised to make nice and to make people around us comfortable. We'll squash our intuition down and say, oh, I'm sure he didn't mean that. Or I'm sure that the way he looked at me was not inappropriate. I'm just being oversensitive. We talk ourselves out of trusting our intuition. But I beg your listeners to not do that. If your intuition tells you that someone's not to be trusted or that a situation is sketchy, you've got to get out of that situation as quickly as possible, even if it means lying. You may tell somebody, if you're in a room with somebody and you're getting those vibes that tell you this is a sketchy person, you can excuse yourself to go to the bathroom and then just leave. You can tell them
Mhm.
you got to get your purse and get something out of your purse and then just leave. You don't owe it to them to make excuses or apologize. You can lie and say, I've got to get home because I've got a test tomorrow. Whatever you need to do to get out of that situation, but do heed your intuition.
That is such a great point. I'm really glad that you brought that up. Because of course, I personally, I'm sure everyone as well that is listening has dealt with the moments where, like, okay, like, am I getting a vibe from this person, or do I feel sort of, let's just say, comfortable with this person? If I don't, then you will know. Like, I had gut feelings, and if I felt comfortable with this person, or when I'm working, or if do I see this person doing something, you can really trust and instant that one, saying, okay, don't go by this person. This person you see is sketchy. Like, you just know.
You
And
do.
with your experiences, like, how did they kind of change your view on, like, sexual assault and molestation?
I, it's interesting because children's experiences, they assume the whole world is like what their experience is. So I thought this was normal, what was happening to me. I mean, I knew I was uncomfortable and I didn't like it, but I thought this was happening to everybody.
Yeah.
And nobody talked about it. So I didn't know that my experience was unusual. It actually wasn't that unusual because there's a very high incidence of child sexual abuse. But as I became an advocate and began to understand the scope of the problem, that really opened my eyes. I mean, they
Mhm.
say one in four girls, 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted during their lifetime, and they estimate like 1 in 6 men, but or some say 1 in 20 men, but I'm finding it to be much more frequent among the men than people, gauge. But a lot of survivors never tell. So
Mhm.
the numbers are kind of all over the place. But every time I give a presentation, people come up to me from the back of the room and tell me their experiences. And almost every woman I know, and I have a very large network, and a lot of the men I know have had some sort of experience that was inappropriate. So, learning what the stats are, learning people's personal experiences really opened my eyes to the scope of the problem and made me even more committed to doing something to combat it.
Like, because I know, like, a lot of people when they experience something like that, they oftentimes, like, don't know what that they didn't know what sort of that meant or what it was, because I know a lot of people don't really know what those things are, or they just, like, they know what it is, but they just don't wanna admit it. And when they do admit it, they oftentimes feel ashamed that it happened, and, like, they just don't wanna feel judged. Like, was that kind of how you felt during that time, or was it completely opposite?
I was very ashamed. And the reason I felt so much shame is that I had the very sad and mistaken belief that there was something wrong with me, something inherently wrong with me that made good people do bad things.
Mhm.
I believed I was the cause of what was happening because I was too cute, because I was too nice, because I was too compliant. I wasn't asking to be molested. It was people who chose to be predators who were in the wrong. And I had no need to be ashamed, but abuse survivors carry that. They blame themselves when in fact that blame
Mhm.
does not belong to them. And if anybody listening has that experience, I just want to tell you right now, honey, it wasn't your fault. That
Mhm.
person chose to do that and you were not asking for that to happen.
Yeah, are exactly correct. Because of course, when you get sexually assaulted or whatever you may get, like, it's never your fault. If
Mm,
someone decides to do that, it's the complete opposite. It's on them. They decided to do that.
mhm.
That's never on you. That's
That's
never.
right.
But, like, of course, like, sharing your story, it takes a lot of courage. I
Yes.
understand completely with my experiences. I grew up anxiety. It took a lot. It took a lot out of me, and I know sharing stories is very important in today's society. But what kind of got you to share your story?
That's a really good question. The more I recognized that this was a common problem, and not an uncommon one. And that by talking about my experience, it gave other people, I was speaking for other people who didn't yet have a voice. The more I felt encouraged to speak out. And the more I told my story about how I overcame the trauma, and people told me that it inspired them in some way, the more I felt compelled to keep telling my story.
Definitely. Because I know like will hearing the people's stories that are experiencing the same thing. I know hearing those stories, it really does impact you to share yours. Like, because of course, like when people oftentimes feel discouraged for sharing their story, it really makes them feel very much ashamed on why they dealt with that. Why am I like this? But to hear someone like you sharing your story, it really impacts others to share their stories as well.
Yeah. And the hope is that those who do not yet have a voice will find their voice. They don't have to go out and give speeches about what happened to them, but if they find their voice to be able to say, this happened to me, I didn't deserve this, I didn't ask for this, and I'm going to take my power back. That's powerful. That's, claiming your power is the most important thing a survivor will ever do.
Definitely. You're so right. And I thought of this question, I was like, I have to ask them because I have no idea how this usually works and how it causes it. But what usually causes violence and abuse towards children? Because I know tons of children get abused or violent every single day. What's your opinion kind of on that?
Well, I that's a really important question. And I was so curious about the answer that I literally went to college and got a master's degree in human violence, trying to understand how people could do the things they do to each other. And a big part of that is that it's generational violence. And so it's done to them, so they do it to others. Because when someone's victimized, they can choose to stay a victim, become a perpetrator, or overcome it. And too many choose to be the perpetrators because their pain, their hurt, their trauma of their own causes them to do that. And in some cases, I think there's even genetic component where they may just be born as a psychopath or a sociopath that leads them to have no compunction about hurting somebody else. I think underneath it all is I don't know if I believe in evil. I don't know that I believe evil exists as a thing so much as people are shaped by their environment and by their nurturing who make choices, bad choices in conjunction with those that lead them to hurt other people. A
It's
lot of ignorance, a lot of fear, lack of love, a lot of self-hatred, a lot of hatred toward others.
That's usually what the cost is. And I really found that usually the most people that do violence or do anything to children or even adults is what they experience when they're young or even have dealing with mental health is what I found. In
Mhm.
most people that do these things is of course people when they see these certain things happening when they're a child, they oftentimes take that on to when they're adult and to do it to other people as
Act it out. And some try to use as an excuse to mitigate what they do, but at some point you grow up and you become an adult and you have the ability to make a choice to act differently. And a lot of people don't make that positive choice. They choose to give into their fear or anger or need to victimize somebody. It's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. But
You're
people,
so
it's interesting because people believe that child abuse and bullying and trafficking, those are intractable problems that can't be solved. And I disagree. I think that there's a lot that can be done to break that generational cycle of violence. To teach children and parents have a lot more power than they realize to take steps to protect the kids.
right. That's
And some
great.
people would come back and say, well, it shouldn't be on the kids to protect themselves. It should be on the predators to not do it. Well, let's be realistic here. We're not going to change the predators, but we can teach the kids and give them the knowledge and the tools and the skills and the armor to protect themselves by teaching them about intuition and boundaries and how to defend themselves physically if they have to. Teaching them what grooming looks like and how to say no to adults and other kids who are dangerous to them. There's
Mhm.
so much that can be done. So I refuse to accept the status quo that says this is an intractable problem.
And I totally get that because, of course, not a lot of people know what grooming or those things are.
Mhm.
until maybe they discuss it, say, okay, this person did this to me. Like, what does that mean? Like, of course, some kids don't know what those mean or even realize that's happening. So oftentimes I'm a big Law and Order SVU fan, so I love like
Mhm.
those type of things. And whoever like watches Law and Order SVU knows that watching those things about grooming, sexual violence, and those sort of things know kind of what it looks like and kind of get a sense of, okay, like, is this actually what grooming or sexual violence is? And I know a lot of parents teach their kids about these topics, but sometimes you just don't expect it to happen to you, especially.
No. And a lot of parents are teaching their kids about stranger danger when in fact strangers are responsible for less than 7% of crimes against kids. So they're
Hmm.
teaching them to mistrust the wrong people. Online certainly strangers are a huge danger, but in real life it's the scoutmasters and the coaches and the ministers and the babysitter, and I mean it's people the kids know that
Yeah,
are the greatest threat to them and other kids. That's child juvenile and juvenile sex crimes are very common. A child's more likely to be molested by an older kid than by a parent.
really? I did not know that. That's
Yep.
crazy. I
Yep.
I did not know that. I have to keep that in mind now for future use, like in case someone asks
Yes.
me those type of questions. Because I
Mhm.
would, because I'm the type of person that will literally forget when someone tells me something, then have to research something back over again. So that is something I would definitely keep in mind. But do you have like kind of a survivor story that someone you know or read online that sticks out to you?
Well, after I gave a presentation, an elderly woman, she was in her late 70s, maybe early 80s, and she shuffled up to me and she whispered in my ear and she said, "When I was 7, my brother molested me, and I never told a soul." And I looked at her and I said, "Honey, you just did." And I'm gonna cry now. We both started crying. I mean, she had carried that for 70 something years in her heart and never spoke a word of it to anybody till that moment. And I felt so much compassion for her, so much, the tragedy of that, but also the fact that that day she found her voice and she was able to tell somebody what had happened. I never saw her again. I don't know her name or anything, but that had a huge impact on me.
I can imagine. Like I could not kind of imagine just holding that in for 70 something years until you hear someone's speech and you're like, okay, might as well get it out in the open right now.
Yeah.
And like with me, I'm a very sensitive person. So if something would have happened, like something like that would have happened, I'd be like, okay, I'm not keeping this in for like much longer because I could
Good.
just never handle something big inside me for that long without telling a
Mm.
soul.
If anybody's listening and they are carrying something like that, please unburden yourself to somebody you trust. It could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be a minister, somebody that you explicitly trust, and share what happened to you. And if it's actively happening to you, please tell somebody so they can help you stop it. You don't need to
Because
live
it's
with that.
such a big problem. It definitely needs to be talked about. But see, no one's gonna help you in what you're going through if you don't tell anybody, whether it's a
That's
parent,
right.
teacher, sibling, whoever, maybe you can be anyone in your life. You're like
Mhm.
telling someone that you trust and love is just very important, that sort of thing.
I would say, and with teenagers online, one of the scariest things to me that's happening online right now is teenagers will make friends with somebody who they either think is another young person like them, who's actually a 50-year-old man sitting in his underwear eating Cheetos on his computer, or an actually talking to an adult who says something, "Let's do something fun, let's be crazy. Take a picture of you in your pajamas and send it to me. And then let's get crazy. Take your top off and you and your bra and send it. It'll be fun. It'll be fun." And as soon as the predator gets that nude or partially nude selfie, then he's got him. He's got him. And he can say, "Send me more and more explicit photos, or I'm going to expose you to your friends and family. I'm going to send these pictures to your friends and family, and they'll be all over the internet, and you'll be, humiliated." And the child, terrified that they'll be humiliated and also terrified of what their parents will do to them for having sent a nude or partially nude selfie, does whatever the perpetrator asks. And the perpetrator is selling those images online to other pervs. And the child gets in so deep, they feel like there's no way out. And that's why we have kids committing suicide. That's why we have kids who are so deeply depressed, who are hurting themselves or running away. And oh my gosh, Kylie, it just breaks my heart because this could happen to any kid.
Mm-hmm. It
And if
really is true.
anybody's in that situation, they need to tell their parents. The parents may get mad, but they'll help stop it. You don't need to feel trapped like there's no way out. There is a way out.
Definitely. And as you kind of work with survivors, like what type of stories and emotions do you typically see with these people?
A lot of shame, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger. The anger usually comes later, though. It's hard when you're blaming yourself for what happened. You have anger toward yourself. It's a more advanced step to become angry at the perpetrator, because then you have to admit that it wasn't your fault. And for a child, that's scary. Imagine a parent is molesting a child. The child is dependent on that parent for love and affection and food and housing and everything like that. They can't afford to admit their parent would do something that awful, so they make up a story with themselves at the center as the problem. The child blames himself and grows up blaming themselves, which makes them more attractive to other predators. You know what I mean? They have no
Mhm.
self-confidence, they have low self-esteem, they're hungry for love and affection and will do just about anything to get it. And they become victimized over and over again, as I did.
Because I know a lot of people may not know, but a lot of people that sometimes would want love and attention even from strangers online. Like they might want to be like, okay, you want to come over even though you don't know them, you know? Like
Yep.
sometimes
Yep.
they just do anything for love and attention, even when they're
Hmm.
alone and depressed.
And they may be at school, they may be being bullied, they may be feel lonely, like they don't have any friends at school or only have a couple friends at school. So when somebody comes online and says, I think you're cool, I think you're funny, I think you're smart, well, that makes them feel really good about themselves. So they trust this person and look up to this person and want their approval. They're more likely to follow any commands from that person, any requests from that person to try to please that person who makes them feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it
And
gets dangerous.
yeah, it really does. Because of course, if you don't know this person, you don't know who they are. They can be a 50-year-old boy that is pretending to be a 15-year-old person
Yep,
and deceptive
exactly.
you. But I would love to talk about your new book, Raising Badass Kids and the Savvy Parents Guide to Predator-Proofing Tweens and Teens. Like, what are you working kind of on next after releasing this book?
I am now working on an online course for parents based on the books. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
really excited about it because a lot of parents tell me, they like the book, but they don't have time to sit down and read books. They want 5-minute videos they can watch while they're waiting for their kid in the carpool lane, or they're waiting at the dentist office or whatever. They want to consume content on their cell phones. That's what they want. And so getting this information out through an online course is going to reach more parents. My second course that I'm working on is one for kids that they can watch with their parents. Parents tell me their number one problem is they don't know what to tell their kids about the dangers or how to say it. So I'm going to say it for them, talk directly to the kids and teach them what they need to know. And then the family can talk about what they just learned.
Because
I'm
I
really
know,
excited about that.
yeah, it's very exciting. Like, I know with a lot of people, they're scared they're gonna put a saying in a wrong light, and it's something that I know with a lot of kids in like this generation don't know what this means or how are they gonna affect me. Sometimes kids will go out thinking, "Oh, okay, nothing's gonna happen to me. Like I'm perfect. No one's gonna talk to me until it happens." So
Mhm.
it's very important to really just have those conversations with parents and their kids, even though it might be very scary. I can imagine it could be so impactful if that something similar happens to you in your
And
life.
kids will listen to their parents more than they let on. And you don't have to make the conversation scary. It can be more lighthearted through daily sharing or monthly family meetings where you talk about a safety topic of the month. But through daily sharing, if parents would put down their phones and they devote at least 15 minutes a day to say to their kids, what's going on in your life right now, rather than say, how was your day? And the kid mumbles, it was fine, and then going on about their business. No, their day wasn't fine. It was filled with failures and laughs and funny stunts and kids getting in trouble and they learn new stuff. So this is about devoting at least 15 minutes of your day to pay attention to your child, look them in the eye and not down at your phone or your Instagram feed, and be present with them so that you had that line of communication open, so that when something does happen that makes your child uncomfortable or afraid, they're more likely to come to you and tell you about it so you can do something about it.
Like that is such an important note because I know with a lot of people, like not having those conversations really mo is most likely to keep that something inside rather
Yeah.
than telling your parents. Because sometimes if parents are not paying attention to their kids and being on their phone, scrolling through TikTok, Instagram, whatever that may be, and it's more or less likely that their kid's not gonna tell them, maybe tell the friends that happened rather than telling them because they're not paying attention to them.
Yeah, and I never told my parents what was happening to me when I was a kid, and but I wanted them to notice. I wanted them to find out, but I didn't know. I was so afraid if I told them they'd be angry with me because, some of the perpetrators told me they would be angry with me. And so but I wanted them to notice and stop it. And so there was that wishful thinking on my part. And if they probed at all, I was one of six kids and I was like the fourth daughter, twin sister of the firstborn son. She had a chance for attention. So um, my parents never really paid attention to me. And it wasn't that they were mean. It was just that was the way it was back in the 60s and 70s. You kick your butt out in the morning and you come back when the streetlights come on.
Yeah. And of course with your books, you have a bunch of details and tools you can use in your life in these situations. But in your book and these online courses, what are some tools that you kind of feature to kind of have conversations like these?
Yeah, and teaching your child what intuition is and how to listen to it and help them nurture that is really important. Helping them understand what boundaries are and helping them set boundaries, physical and emotional boundaries. Like if somebody sits real close to you and you don't know them, you have the right to get up and move or to tell them to move back. Giving them permission to say no and set these boundaries is what I call moxie. When you defend your boundaries, I call it moxie, which is like nerve or chutzpah, the ability to defend those boundaries and trust that intuition. Really, really important. But the number one thing is teaching your kid they can say no. 99% of the crap that happened to me never would have happened if I'd had that word in my vocabulary.
Because I know with me, I have a hard time saying no as well. Ever since I was a kid, I had a hard time saying no. I'm always a yes person. I love to make people
Mhm.
happy, but I'm like always dragging myself to say no when I don't want to do something or if I feel uncomfortable. I'm always trying to encourage myself, but sometimes it can be very difficult to say no because sometimes people can be a very people pleaser and don't know how to say no.
Still a people pleaser. And I will say this, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to give a reason why you're saying no. You don't have to say no, but you can just say no, thank you, or no. They
Hmm.
say, "Would you do this for me?" You can say, "No, thank you," or "I'm sorry, but I don't have the ability to do that right for you right now."
That's all you can say. If you
That's
don't
all you
like
gotta
it,
say.
say,
You don't
makes
have to go
complete
on and on
sense.
about it. You don't have to let them guilt you into it. You just say no.
Yep.
I
And
challenge you to say no one time this week. See
I'll
how it
do
feels.
that.
It'll feel uncomfortable at first. It'll feel really uncomfortable. But if you're willing to feel uncomfortable for 15 or 30 seconds, the reason we feel uncomfortable is we don't want to embarrass the other person or ourselves. And that's what feels uncomfortable. Like if I say no, will they not like me anymore? Will they not love me? Will they not hire me? Will they not let me work for them? Whatever. Well, they'll still like you and love you and they'll respect you even more.
And being honest is the best thing that could ever happen to you.
Yes, it is.
And before we head off, I want to ask you, like, where can people buy the book and learn more about your upcoming online courses?
Absolutely. My books are available on Amazon. And my name is CJ Scarlet with one T. So it's Scarlet. And I'm going to send people to my website at thebadassgrandma.com. They can sign up for to receive notifications for my newsletter, whatever, and they'll get notified when the online course comes out, the one for parents and the one for kids. So badassgrandma.com.
Awesome. Make sure to go check that out. I totally recommend. It's amazing the thing that CJ is doing. And it's really much of good to have these conversations. I know, because of course, like being educating on these things is very important in case something happens or you see someone that is doing things to make sure that this will stop and to never happen again. But I really appreciate you, CJ, for everything you're doing. And I'm so glad we were able to do this.
Him too. Thank you so much for having me, Kylie. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Make sure to stay tuned for upcoming episodes. It's going to be very fun. But thank you everyone for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much, CJ. And I hope you enjoy the rest of
Thanks.
your day.